It was on December 3rd of 2018 when a guy by the name of Tatsuki Fujimoto made a manga called This, and because of that a couple things happened. First it was this, and then this, and then this, and then this, and then this.
Makimasa, Daisuke, I love you.
And let's just be honest with ourselves, nobody ever plans for things to turn out this way. I went to a convention recently and the line literally looked like the entrance to a fucking Coachella. There's people barking. Let me just say that one more time. There's people barking in the middle of a conference. You mean to tell me that's normal? Even my own Cuban mom knows what this manga is. All of this made me want to ask 3 questions. Questions that initially I thought were pretty simple to answer, only for me to quickly realize that I was about to enter into a literal abyss of the internet. Some of you may be wondering, Alex, where have you been for 3 months? Well, thanks for asking. I've been losing my fucking sanity trying to unravel this phenomenon. The first question was, how? How did things end up this way? How did we go from a drawing of a stupid little dog to this crowd, these memes, these fans, these cosplayers, these fans, and about 1 million bajillion views on just about anything related to it? The second question was, why? Why do people like me and so many others become obsessed with these things? And not just for Chainsaw Man, but literally anything related to its author. An author who has a very, very long history of making some of the weirdest shit I've ever seen in my life. And that leaves us with the third question. The third question was so hard to answer that I ended up having to go through some of the most ridiculous tasks I've ever done in my life. Part of the reason why this video is so long is because I may or may not have actually formulated data, drawn for a month straight, read just about every single piece of information about this deranged man, and also done an entire breakdown of why this image exists. It's to the point where I've gone so far deep into this journey that I practically became Tatsuki Fujimoto. If you clicked on this video thinking I'd summarize to you what the plot of Chainsaw Man is, then I'm sorry. And I also have no intention of being like, yes, good evening, my fellow concierge. Today I will be discussing why this dog is a physical representation of fear, struggle, and anguish. Oh no, believe me when I say that this video is gonna be much weirder. So feel free to grab a chair, some popcorn, and a bottle of Windex to strap into this very long, weird, and messy journey where we uncover everything that happened before December 3rd of 2018 and everything after, with the first question being, what in the fuck is going on, man? And if I had to take a guess, I would say it started somewhere with this image. Believe it or not, there was actually a point where Tatsuki Fujimoto was known as that guy who made a manga called Fire Punch, and before that he was a college student known for making some very strange one-shots. But one of the hardest questions you could ask is, who exactly is Tatsuki Fujimoto? There was only 2 things that people ever really knew about him. 1, he was a young manga artist winning a shit ton of awards, and 2, this weird symbol was his identity. I would definitely say that reading his one-shots is an experience, with one of them being Little Sister, Elder Sister, which is about 2 siblings that literally draw each other naked. Another one he made back in 2013 was Sasaki Stop the Bullet, which is about a guy who literally stops a bullet because he wants to bang his teacher. Multiple times, I've caught myself asking the question, who the hell makes something like this? And weirdly enough, I think that actually was the appeal to a lot of his work. Fujimoto has been publishing these since he was only 17 years old, and when asked about his early creative process, he would describe it as 0 days of storyboarding, 3 months of inking, which just isn't something you hear from anyone ever. But that was just the way this guy worked, whether it was romance, action, or 2 sisters drawing each other naked. It felt like this dude was willing to say and draw just about anything. Other than that, there's really only like 2 videos that even exist of him on the internet. In one of them, he records himself trying to levitate, and it has become one of the biggest mysteries to me as to why this has 2 fucking million views. Meanwhile, the other one is a song he wrote about his favorite food. The best way I could describe Fujimoto is that he's like a car crash you can't look away from. I'd never go as far as to say that these one-shots were good, but it was little things here and there that made reading something from Fujimoto feel unique. The intensity, the ridiculously over-the-top scenarios, and I think nothing highlights that feeling better than his one-shot called Love is Blind, which is a simple story about a kid that wants to ask out one of his classmates, only for every single inconvenience in the world to prevent him from doing so. First his teacher stops him, then some dude on the street tries to mug them, and then a fucking alien comes down to destroy the planet. But even under all of these ridiculous circumstances, the main character proceeds to confess his feelings anyways, which objectively speaking is just hilarious. It's such an extreme and weird way to express the idea that it's hard to ask someone out. And let me just say, I've never found a one-shot to be more relatable in my life. While most of his work was strange, I think under all these bizarre scenarios he'd come up with, there was still some, no pun intended, heart to them. Because if there was one thing you were guaranteed when reading something that was made by him, it was that you were going to enter some weird and unexplored territory. Even if some of them are about two sisters drawing each other naked. Fujimoto has even stated in an interview that he keeps his identity a secret in fear of someone trying to kill him, which from what we've seen earlier kind of does make sense. But part of me also feels like this dude should just avoid being on the internet in general, because at one point he tried to make a Twitter, but instead of making a normal profile, he made one impersonating his sister. Is it just me, or am I starting to see a pattern here? But I actually like to think that because there's so much mystery as to what kind of person Fujimoto was, that made his work so much more compelling. It was almost like the only way you could understand him better was by reading his work. And it wasn't until 2016 where he'd eventually land a shot at making a manga for none other than one of the biggest magazines of all time. And right when he was given this opportunity, the guy did the exact opposite of what you would expect. Give yourself some time to really picture this in your head. You, young, handsome, and full of dreams, you've been working hard day in and day out, constantly drawing in hopes of one day becoming a famous manga artist. And then it finally happens. But not only were you provided with an opportunity, you were given the opportunity to make a name for yourself, because you just received a call back from none other than Shonen Jump. And this meant that if you played your cards right, you could be a star. You could have your name right alongside the greats. But there's one thing. As likely as you are to succeed from this, there's a much higher chance that you could also get axed at any moment. And that's because while Shonen Jump is known for producing some of the biggest names in the industry, it's also known for cutting off anything they consider to be less than great. And most manga artists would be in this position and do, you know, what everybody wants. Now, the reason why I made up this scenario is because this is the exact opportunity that was given to Tatsuki Fujimoto. Just coming out of college, it must have been like a dream come true for a 22-year-old to get a chance like this. I'm literally a year younger than that, and I already shit myself thinking about how many people watch these videos, so I can't even imagine being in his shoes, knowing that you are about to make one of the most important decisions in your life at such a young age. And actually, here's an exact reenactment of what Fujimoto ended up doing. Excuse me, everyone. I would like for you all to meet our new up-and-coming mangaka. Please welcome Tatsuki Fujimoto. Please, have a seat, Mr. Fujimoto. We are very excited to be working with you. Actually, we're big fans ourselves, and we'd love to hear what kind of ideas you might have for your next up-and-coming manga. Is everything alright, Mr. Fujimoto? Did he just pick his fucking nose? Sorry, I'm not exactly following here. If I wanted to, I could actually split the viewers that are watching this video right now into two separate categories. There's those who have never read Fire Punch, and then there's those who should probably go see a therapist. To those of you that aren't familiar with this manga, then this next segment is for you. Take a look at this cover and tell me what exactly stands out to you. And then to follow up, take a wild guess as to what this story could possibly be about. Now, most of you are probably going to be like, guy plus fire plus probably likes to punch people. And if that was your first impression, that's fine, because I honestly thought the same thing as well. But all it really takes is one or two chapters for you to realize that you couldn't be further from the truth. I will now be summarizing to you the disaster that is the first chapter of this manga. Fire Punch takes place in a world covered in snow, and the story is told through the perspective of a little boy named Agni, who was born with a special ability that people in this universe would call a blessing. No one truly knows how or why this phenomenon happens, but many consider it to be a gift that was handed down from God himself. Some able to use the ability to fly, use super strength, or even manipulate electricity, and our main protagonist Agni was born with the blessing of regeneration, alongside his sister also having the same but much weaker version of his powers. Now, I'd like to ask you all a question. If you lived in a village that had no food and you had regenerative powers, what would you do? Well, if your name starts with F and rhymes with Bujimoto, then your answer was, duh, feed them my limbs. Yes, you heard that right. Agni is actually the main source of food for this village, which had people feeling pretty divided because on one hand, and some barbecue sauce. So the creative process for that joke was that because it's a manga with cannibalism in it, I thought it would be funny to say that the villagers would also have a certain preference of condiments when eating a child's hand. So you have a village that is feeling pretty... I should also mention that Agni's sister wants his babies because of course it's written by fucking Tatsuki Fujimoto. You have a village that is feeling pretty conflicted over this. People don't want to starve to death, but they also don't want to have to eat child soup. And what makes matters even worse is that not too long after, a military group decides to take base at this village. And it doesn't take too long before they find out where exactly they've been getting these resources from. And once their commander hears about this, the original plan is out of the question. No longer were they going to take shelter here. Instead, they were instructed to eviscerate the entire village. Their leader Doma was born with a blessing of fire, more specifically fire that never goes out. And because he considered this whole fiasco to be an act against God, he proceeded to burn away the whole village, with the only remaining survivors being Agni and Luna. Now remember when I mentioned what their powers were? Well, because of that, they are now constantly being cooked alive, screaming in pain as their bodies collapse, only for it to grow right back. But since Luna was born with a much weaker sense of regeneration, eventually she gives out, and she looks over to Agni, ready to say her last words. A smile comes out, as she then tells Agni that he needs to live. And what's followed up by this is honestly one of the most horrifying panels I've ever seen in my life, because this panel is the very moment where Agni realizes what he must do. He had to avenge all the innocent families that were taken away by the hands of Doma. Days pass by as Agni can't even move a single limb. Weeks go on and it hurts so much to the point where he can't even scream, with the only thought that's going through his mind is Luna's last wish. As time went on, there was finally a point where he could withstand these flames. It took years for Agni to be able to train himself to breathe and walk again. But this man who was taking his first steps onto snow was no longer the kid we once knew. And it's after this point where the real story of Fire Punch begins. A story where a grown man named Agni must spend the rest of his life enduring this pain for the sake of everyone. Do you see what I mean when I say that this cover lies to you? This has nothing to do with a guy made out of fire who likes to punch people. This is about a guy on fire trying to avenge his weirdly romantic sister. And to really paint the picture here, you have to understand that this was labeled as a shonen series. When it was 2016, you could either choose to read Demon Slayer, Haikyuu, One Piece, Food Wars, or you could just read something like this. And as more chapters came out, more people were either in shock or completely confused. Half of the subreddit consists of people asking what the hell they even just read. I had a friend pick it up recently, and he went from this is the coolest thing ever to this is the biggest piece of shit I've ever read, all within a week. And I haven't even touched on the references upon references that are in this manga, such as Star Wars or Tom Cruise. There's even a character in this manga named Togata, who, if I could somehow summarize her, is basically a manga character that's trying to make a movie out of the manga that they're in. If you thought that was confusing, well, so did everyone else that read it. As a matter of fact, later on in the video, you will learn that the most frequently used adjective that were used to describe Fire Punch were actually weird and confusing. And you might be asking, Alex, where exactly did you get this data from? Well, I'm glad you asked, Nathan. It's not like any of this happened by accident. Tatsuki Fujimoto knew exactly what he was doing. He knew a series like this would cause quite a reaction. There's been many interviews where he's mentioned that his readers were most likely bored of manga and probably wanted something new, something ridiculous, something like Fire Punch, where a panel like this one actually exists and isn't photoshopped. And whether you absolutely hated it or not, the one thing you can't deny was that Fujimoto had a very distinct kind of storytelling, which made people become obsessed. Even well-known names in the manga industry were starting to take note, such as the creators of One Punch Man, Tokyo Ghoul, and the wildest of them all was actually the creator of Blade of the Immortal. As a matter of fact, they even did a whole interview together that you can look up for yourself if you want to, because at some point, they literally just start talking about how they're into dummy mommies. Now, I will not be going into detail of that conversation because it would be completely unrelated. In June of 2017, an interview took place between Tatsuki Fujimoto and Samura Hiroaki, and later into the discussion, there's a part where Fujimoto asks Samura what kind of girls he was into, and Samura responds by saying that he has always had a desire to serve a strong woman. And then Fujimoto shares a story where one time in college, some girl pushed his bike down, and he was like, damn, I'm kinda into this. But there's one big giant question mark that we're left with here. Sure, Fujimoto is a weird guy that makes art for weird people, but that doesn't exactly explain how any of this happened, and as someone who had to reread all of Fujimoto's work for this video, I was left feeling pretty stuck, and that was the case for quite some time, until I came across one single post on 4chan. So on March 10th, 2020, there was an anonymous user who decided to pick up this manga during the pandemic, and instead of keeping it to themselves, they decided to read it and share their experience through storytime posts on 4chan. And at first, I'm sure they were in for a ride. I mean, when your experience involves incest and cannibalism and the 10,000 other crazy wild things that happen in this manga, it's probably a guaranteed good time. But what none of these people knew was that they were going to start a fucking disaster. A disaster that all happened once they read chapter 53 of Fire Punch. One of the darkest aspects of this manga is looking at the tragedy that is Agni's character. Throughout the story, you witness this guy go through some of the most traumatic experiences one could imagine. But whether it's fear, pain, loneliness, despair, or anguish, none of it can break him. And that's not by choice. All of it is because of the powers that he was born with. Fujimoto wanted to explore how far you can tear something down that can't be broken. And nothing highlights that reality more than in chapter 53 of Fire Punch. For once, it feels like we have finally seen Agni reach his limit. And there's a part where he says, I don't even know what is happening anymore. Not a single thing. I've lost the ability to work it out in my crazy head. I can't think. For a moment he cries, and in the next moment, this panel shows up. What you are looking at right now is a man who has been torn apart more times than you can imagine. A man who right now is doing everything possible to even know what it feels like to be happy. And it is just about the funniest shit ever. The day that 4chan discovered this panel, they lost it. Overnight, this became the most frequently used reaction for everything. It single-handedly became the meme of the fucking year. And the best part was that you could use this panel for literally anything. Hey man, how's your day going? Do you have work today? Honey, I want a divorce. It also came in every variation you could possibly imagine. Guts, Wojak, some dude from Final Fantasy, Invincible, a shopping bag. I don't even know what this is supposed to be. It's to the point now where if you like something, there's a good chance you could probably find an Agni meme that's out there of it. And to no one's surprise, there's also one for every single character in Chainsaw Man, which literally makes this a reference of a reference of a reference that's all done by the same fucking author. We have come full circle here. With this meme blowing up overnight, more people started to read Fire Punch, and with more people reading Fire Punch, more people knew about Tatsuki Fujimoto, which then made more people read Chainsaw Man, which made Chainsaw Man, a manga that was already starting to get popular, get even more popular, which then made more people make memes out of both series. The internet has become a giant fucking turbo generator for shit posts and memes. There is a point where I genuinely thought I'd seen every version of the Agni meme, only for me to realize that I've barely even scratched the surface. This one's done by a YouTube channel called Egg Sandwich, who decided to make just about the most cursed video I've ever seen in my life. This guy on Reddit just hung it up at his school and no one noticed? I even know people personally who found out about Fire Punch through a meme video made by Anime Hooligan, which is a 4chan post about Tatsuki Fujimoto recreated through an American Psycho scene. Literally, while I was making this video, someone out there decided to make an Agni meme of the new Cyberpunk anime. It doesn't stop. It doesn't stop. They're never gonna stop making these. It's like an infinite void of nothingness, and I'm just going insane! So, On January 1st of 2018, Tatsuki Fujimoto would later go on to finish his last chapter of Fire Punch. In the most vague way I could possibly phrase it, let's just say people had some opinions. If you're one of the people who had finished reading this manga, you were likely in one of three camps. You either A, loved it and became obsessed with the work of Fujimoto, B, you thought it was a car crash you couldn't look away from, or C, you absolutely despised it and wanted nothing to do with it. But the most common point of discussion that came from Fujimoto's debut was that something about him felt odd. And no, when I say that, I'm not referring to any of the sibling stuff or his weird sense of humor, or even the fact that he once ranked bananas by the ripeness and said brown ones tasted the best, although after discovering this information, I realized I've been researching a sick man. But it was more so something that I think a lot of people who have ever tried making anything can probably relate to. And the best way for me to explain it is that everyone in the back of their mind has a very specific voice. Whenever you try to come up with an idea and see if you should try to do it, there's always that voice in the back of your mind that tells you no, that's a silly, dumb, or weird idea, and you should give up. I have this happen to me at least once a day, and I'm pretty sure anyone watching this knows exactly what I'm talking about. But the thing that felt off about the work of Fujimoto was that it was almost like this voice never existed. And even if it did, it was probably coming from his editor who had to tell him, hey man, do you mind toning it down? I probably mentioned this somewhere in a previous video, but the thing that I truly love about manga is the way it makes me feel like I'm looking into another person's mind. The way they draw, write, or present their panels, it's all entirely unique to the author. And when I read Fire Punch for the first time, it felt like this weird fever dream that has always existed in Fujimoto's brain. I mean, I would honestly use that description for literally any story he's ever written. Every time I read one of these, there's a part where I'm like, oh, okay, things are going in this direction. And then I flip the page and I'm like, oh, well, never mind. And I like to think that Fujimoto's style of diving headfirst into this kind of territory was what spawned this niche community of manga readers. People that had a very strong emotional reaction to these deranged pieces of storytelling, an experience that you couldn't really find anywhere else. But before the world could be ready for any more of Fujimoto, it took him about 11 months to finally start serializing his next manga, which is actually pretty quick given that most authors will take long breaks after having finished a series. And maybe you're wondering, what exactly was Fujimoto going to do next? Well, what he would end up doing was cause one of the biggest stirs the manga industry has ever seen. So far into this video, we have managed to answer the questions, who was Tatsuki Fujimoto, and what was all this heebie-jeebie going on before December 3rd of 2018. And now, we will be shifting over to the next segment I like to call Manga was a fucking mistake. Chainsaw Man is a story full of characters that we all know and love, with one of the fan favorites being Kobeni, a 20-year-old devil hunter that's kind, talented, and tends to get nervous in stressful situations. This is her drawn as a horse. Another one that's considered to be a fan favorite is Makima, a very gentle and cunning leader who has nothing but the utmost respect from her employees. This is her drawn as a horse. I'm not really seeing the connection here. Anyone that does, please let me know. Depending on who you ask, Chainsaw Man is known for a lot of things. Maybe you've seen it through memes or fan art or cosplayers or YouTube trailers with a million bajillion views on them, or for many of the annoying people that literally cannot stop talking about it in their videos. Maybe you've heard it through the ridiculous amount of Chainsaw Man crossovers that are on the internet, such as Horikoshi literally drawing Denji in a chapter of My Hero Academia, and if you're none of those, then maybe you've seen it referenced alongside other famous pieces of media, such as Kanye West, or Mob Psycho, or One Piece, or Team Fortress 2, or Breaking Bad, or Breaking Bad, or Breaking Bad. I came across a suspicious amount of Breaking Bad crossovers while making this. For example, here's Kobeni sitting next to Jesse, here's Denji and Aki wearing meth lab suits, here's Walter and Jesse working at Los Pollos Hermanos with Kobeni, here's the actor for Gus Fring holding a Pochita plushie, here's a drawing of Saul if he was the Chainsaw Devil, and here's Walter White next to a duck. I actually highly doubt you found out about Chainsaw Man this way. I just think it's cool that my two favorite things in life have somehow meshed. Fujimoto first came up with the concept of Chainsaw Man during the publishing of Fire Punch. Apparently he thought the idea of someone pulling on a cord and then a chainsaw coming out of their head would be a pretty neat concept to draw. But as this idea was further expanded upon, he also wanted to try telling a story about a teenage boy that a lot more people could relate to, somebody that was far from perfect and maybe a bit more unhinged, which led him to the idea of coming up with the character of Denji. And what I know for a fact is that there was absolutely no way he could have expected the outcome of this single idea. The story of Chainsaw Man takes place in a world full of devils, demons, fiends, and anything that's left for the imagination, and we're shown all of these things from the life of a teenage boy named Denji. Now, Denji here is a lot of things. He's dumb, he's weird, and wants nothing more in life than the most basic needs a human could deserve, and he is all of these things because he's also broke as shit. The first page is him talking about how he sold one of his balls, and alongside this Uniball teenager is a dog made out of one of the most inefficient weapons I've ever seen in my life, and these two pair up to become devil hunters in hopes of paying off the massive debt that Denji owes to the Yakuza, a debt that he's been trying to pay off ever since he was just a little kid. And things start going south pretty quickly once Denji realizes that they never actually planned on letting him go. Where the two of them are sent off to go do another job ends up being a ploy for their execution. And it's hard to look at some of these panels because you can't help but feel bad for the life that was given to Denji, having grown up as an abandoned orphan and never getting to experience even the simplest joys in life, never had toast and jam, never even slept on a proper bed before. All of these sacrifices being made only for him to end up in a giant pile of garbage. And it's at this point, somewhere between being alive and in the afterlife, where it's revealed that Pochita is willing to offer him a devil contract. In exchange for Denji's life, the only request that he asks for is to show him his dreams, to show him a world where he deserves all of these things, to show him a life where he can prove that he truly belongs. And this became the end of a story about Denji and the beginning of what we all know as Chainsaw Man, which is then followed up by some of the most captivating panels I've ever seen in my life. 10 whole pages of nothing but blood splatting, guts flying everywhere, and Denji losing his fucking sanity. You see him let out nothing but sheer rage at this malicious world that he was born into, all the people that have abused him, and now having lost the only friend he's ever had. And out of all of these panels, the one that became unforgettable was this one. At the bottom, you see this dark void of nothing but chaos and destruction. And at the top, you see Denji laughing like a fucking maniac. And I remember the exact moment that I first came across these pages for two reasons. The first one was, this manga was actually my first manga ever, so me retelling you what happens in the first chapter is me literally retelling my first experience with all of manga itself. And I guess you could say things took quite a turn after that. And the second reason is a lot more personal to me. I think it was a matter of right place and right time, which eventually led this manga to literally changing the course of my life. But because of that, I also have a really weird relationship with this story. It's got nothing to do with it being good or bad or weird or me liking a certain character, and it's for those reasons that I can't really tell you what Chainsaw Man is. I mean, I can, but what Chainsaw Man is to me is way different from what the average person would think of it. So, instead of listening to what I have to say about it, why don't we try hearing it from 652 people? 3 months ago, I made a community post asking you guys two simple questions. The first one was, how did you find out about Tatsuki Fujimoto? Was it through Fire Punch, Chainsaw Man, or a one-shot? The second question was, what did you think of it? I made it so that you could either decide to respond to these questions anonymously or just comment directly under the post, and this added up to a total of 620 responses. But part of me felt like that wasn't enough, so additionally, I decided to post the exact same questions in both the Fire Punch and Chainsaw Man subreddit. But unfortunately, I only managed to get another 30 or so responses. But this was still not enough. I had to diversify. So then I went to ask my own mother what she thought about Chainsaw Man, and she said, "Keh?" In total, we were left with exactly 652 responses to the survey, and I decided to not only read all of it, I may have also tried turning it into data. The first question was, which manga led you to discovering Tatsuki Fujimoto? And unsurprisingly, a majority of them said Chainsaw Man. On the other hand, 15.49% of them said they had first read Fire Punch, and less than 1% said they found Fujimoto through one of his one-shots. And a grand total of 1 person said they found him through Nayuta the Prophecy, which, like, I don't even, like, what were you doing? But honestly, none of this data was that surprising. What I was more interested in was what people thought of it. And since I decided to let people type as little or as much as they wanted, this part may or may not have also ended up taking the longest to read, because turns out 60,000 words is actually a lot of words. But once I read through all 652 responses, I came up with an idea. I wanted to find a way where I could actually try to extract data from this. So because wasting my time is my fucking forte apparently, I tried to see which adjectives were used most frequently for each response. And these are the results. A total of 319 of the responses noted they had a fairly positive experience with their manga. But to me, the funniest part was that number 3 was actually the word weird. And number 7, the word unique, was used a total of 61 61 times, and 37 people described it as dumb. And this part doesn't really even matter, but I just found it funny how the phrase, "what the fuck did I just read?" is a very specific thing to say, yet 4 of the responses said this exact same thing. Now let's be honest here. If my barely passing grade in college statistics has taught me anything, it's that this data doesn't really say much. For me to take a look at the adjectives or percentages of how many people have read each manga wouldn't really indicate how the general public feels about Tatsuki Fujimoto. But if there was one thing I was able to take away from all this, was that I started noticing patterns in what was being mentioned about Chainsaw Man. There were 3 aspects of the story that kept coming up as the reasons for why people loved this manga, with the first one being its characters. And no, I don't mean these characters, I'm actually talking about these characters. Here's a crash course of how devils in this manga work. If you fear Thing, then Thing becomes a devil that gets big and scary. But also, the more you fear Thing, the bigger and scarier it gets. For example, here's what the Tomato Devil looks like, and right alongside it, here's what the Eternity Devil looks like. This premise basically implies that in this universe, there is a devil out there for literally anything you could be scared of. So I'm not even kidding when I say that there is a cucumber devil, a fish devil, a grape devil, a chicken devil, a pig devil, a thing devil. But the point that I'm trying to get at here is that Fujimoto has kind of laid out this playing field where anything could happen. You could unironically assume that at some point Fujimoto might include a grandma devil. It's actually so funny to me that because of the way the author is, that is an actual possibility as to what could exist in the Chainsaw Man universe. And this also led to a fun little leeway for fans to come up with their own ideas. It all started with a couple silly jokes here and there. Like there's a part in one of the early chapters where Denji kicks Aki in the nuts. And the punchline that people always use is that Aki got attacked by the testicle devil. Pretty funny, right? Well, later on people started posting their own fan-made devils on Twitter, and there was a point where a bunch of drawings of Home Depot devils actually ended up on the trending page. The hammer devil, the screwdriver devil. And what's funny is that these all genuinely look like they'd be in the manga. But then this spawned a million other potential ideas. The knife devil, the belt devil, the axe devil, the axe devil. This leads me to the second aspect of Chainsaw Man that I noticed people fell in love with, and that's its characters. And no, I don't mean these characters, I actually mean these This is such a dumb joke. While these 2 mangas may highly differ in tone, the one thing that I think has stayed is Fujimoto's commitment to making some of the most unhinged characters I've ever seen. This person's only piece of dialogue is the word Halloween. This is a German named Santa Claus. This girl's name is Power, and her goal is to one day become the prime minister and increase sales tax by 1,000%. And Denji's main goal is to know what it's like to cop a feel. In this manga, you have scumbags, idiots, psychopaths, and sometimes people like Kobani who are in a permanent state of fear over everything. And I think what has drawn so many people to love these characters is this weird sense of honesty about them. Devil hunters aren't exactly the heroes of anything. As a matter of fact, most of them die on the first day of their job, so there's not really any room for normal people to be in this line of work. And what I love about this story is seeing what kind of a person it would take to still be willing to take that risk. In the same way we came to understand why Denji is the way that he is, you slowly start to unravel why some of these people are so out of pocket. Why Aki's first reaction when he meets Denji is to literally kick him in the only nut that he's got left. And you meet dozens upon dozens of characters that are all like this. Whether they're a human, devil, fiend, or Kobani, they all come in their own different shape and size. With the one thing in common is them being extremely flawed people. Except for Beam. His only flaw is that he's a shark. Other than that, he's perfect. And this idea becomes solidified in chapter 29 when Captain Kishibe is introduced, saying, "The devil hunters that devils fear are the ones with a few loose screws." And if you look at any of the characters who live for more than 5 chapters, it almost becomes obvious. There's many scenes where you find Denji struggling to understand his own feelings, why he can't seem to cry or even care about others in the same way a normal person would. Meanwhile, for someone like Aki, it becomes almost impossible for him to avoid being an emotional person. And Power, well, I mean, she's just Power. Obviously, I'm gonna be a little bit biased here, but if I had to pick the one thing that I love most about this manga is that I'm reading a story about broken people that feel like they're being healed when surrounded by one another. It's seeing these 3 live together and feel like the family they never had, even down to the smallest, dumbest little moments they share amongst themselves. Literally, one of my favorite scenes is when Denji tries to make Aki feel better by starting a nutsack kicking tournament, which, first of all, that's hilarious. I love the fact that to Denji's brain, he's like, yeah, I feel a little bad about kicking him in the balls, so maybe I should let him kick other people in the balls. But I like to think that in some way, shape, or form, this weird cast of characters really started to resonate with a lot of people. I mean, spend more than 3 seconds on Twitter or Reddit and you'll realize there's a fan base for literally every single character that's ever been introduced in this manga. Especially this one. Especially this one. The thing is, Tatsuki Fujimoto was actually fully aware of this, and during the serialization of Chainsaw Man, both him and his editor decided to run a series of polls where fans could vote who their favorite characters were. But what these people didn't know was the absolutely devastating deeds Fujimoto was going to do with this information. If you were someone who loved this manga, this sounded like a cute little fun idea you could have been a part of. What harm could it do for someone to vote who their favorite character was in Chainsaw Man? Which at first, there weren't any. It was actually pretty wholesome and entertaining. In one of the surveys, Kobeni got placed lower than Kobeni's car, and in another one, Fujimoto himself actually received over 2,000 votes. Now, I have decided to blur the results of these polls because there are some of you watching this right now who may have not read or finished Chainsaw Man yet, meaning that you don't know the things that Fujimoto decided to do with this information, meaning that you weren't there to witness this man tear his fans to shreds, because you never realized that this symbol he's been using all along was meant to embody how he toys with your heart. What you didn't know was that this is a face that laughs at your suffering and will twist and burn your heart into a million pieces. The third reason was pretty self-explanatory. Chainsaw Man is probably one of the most action-filled, fast-paced shonen manga that's out there. There are some fight scenes that have literally been branded into my memory, like this one, or even this one. Every single moment and everything in between is a part of the wild, bombastic ride that is this manga. And I know I'm not the only one that feels this way because each and every single one of these moments have been recreated in every single way possible. Which leads me to the third and the most ridiculously complicated question that I had to answer while making this video. We know who Fujimoto is, and we know what led up to this point. But the final question that I had was, why is there so much Chainsaw Man stuff? On July 12th of 2022, the first chapter of Part 2 was released, and in the span of 24 hours, my entire Twitter timeline was flooded with this. And in the literal next day, someone came out with this animation. Remember that joke about Aki getting kicked in the balls? Yep, that's right, there's an animation out there for it. Remember the part where Denji first became the Chainsaw Devil? Already been animated. Now, I'm fully aware of the fact that it took me so long to make this video that the adaptation has already come out. But I'd like to make the argument that Chainsaw Man already had an adaptation before its adaptation. Someone made an entire fucking video game of Kobeni's dancing scene. Someone else made a Chainsaw Man mod for this game. Here's an animation of the Darkness Devil. Here's an MMV of the Darkness Devil. And here's a literal rendering of the Darkness Devil. Here's a thing of another thing of a certain scene that happened in this manga. I think it's one thing for me to acknowledge that there are a lot of Chainsaw Man fans out there. It's another thing for them to be so unnecessarily talented. There's an infinite amount of devil variations. There's a chair devil, there's a leaf blower devil, there's even a sus devil. I have spent months finding these. You may as well refer to me as a connoisseur because it would literally require for this video to be 8 hours long for me to even scratch the surface of what's out there. And as I was scouring through the depths of the internet, I have realized there are two kinds of Chainsaw Man fan creations. There's those who are talented and are capable of making some cool shit. And then there's those who should have gone to see a psychiatrist instead of sharing their work. Like, I came across this website called Bilibili, which I think is like the Southeast Asian version of YouTube. And I don't think there's words in any language that would be capable of describing the things that I saw on this website. Don't believe me? Fine. I fucking dare you to try and come up with an explanation for what I'm about to show you. Ready? And I really do hope, after all this, after all the games, songs, animations, and whoever made this drawing of a sweatshop worker making a Makima plushie, I hope I've made my point that Fujimoto has spawned one of the most ridiculous communities I've ever seen in my life. However, there's one last thing before we must end this video. I've been including bits and pieces of some of my favorite fan creations that I've come across, but I've been doing this with the intent of saving the best one for last. After spending months of scouring through the deepest parts of the internet, I believe I have found the magnum opus of Chainsaw Man. I have found a piece of fan art that might as well redefine what the word art even means. And it was made by a person called John Wee. On February 16th, 2021, A DeviantArt user by the name of John Wee published a piece of fan art that was titled Blueberry Kobeni, with its caption saying, "I've made a fan art of Kobeni Higashiyama from Chainsaw Man in her blueberry form, after she's accidentally drank a blueberry potion after she's got herself a new job at the blueberry store." Now do me a favor and take a closer look at it. Look at her eyes, look at her shape, look at the emotions that are being displayed in front of you. At first, it may seem like a simple drawing of Kobeni in her blueberry girl form, but its true meaning is hidden underneath the pigment that accentuates this piece of art. Because it's not just blue, it's a shade that lies between Prussian blue and Liberty blue, famously known for serving as a symbolism for elegance, authority, and stability. But I believe that this was not the artist's original vision. The question should not be why a blueberry potion, but why blue itself. What blue really means is fear, struggle, and anguish, generational propositions, and revolution, which speaks volumes that he specifically chose to present this through the character of Kobeni, who's a perfect dichotomy of balancing everything and also nothing. It is so simple, yet so beautiful, yet so elegant, yet so blue. The artist John Wee has over 15,000 different drawings, and they are all characters being drawn as blueberries. I could make an entire video on this, but I don't think you want me to be gone for another 3 months. If there's a point that I was trying to get at here, it's that when I see this crowd, these memes, these fans, these cosplayers, and yes, even these fans, I can't help but feel like in that sea of people, there has to be someone out there who feels the same way I did when I first came across this manga. I've been kind of beating around the bush about this, but I've been doing that because it's genuinely so hard for me to put into words how I feel about the things that I love most. Because it's not really got anything to do with how well it's written or how good of a story I think Chainsaw Man is. I think it has a lot more to do with the fact that it just kind of caught me at the right place and right time. This is a bit embarrassing for me to share this, but when I first started reading manga, I was like really depressed. You know that episode of SpongeBob where Squidward's going through the same day over and over again? That's basically how I felt for a really long time. And for whatever reason, when I first came across this story, it was almost like the world around me didn't exist for a second. I didn't have to worry about anything or anyone, and it's probably up there as one of my favorite memories to ever look back on. So when I asked the most difficult question of why is there so much Chainsaw Man stuff, I'm really asking, why did so many people have as strong of a reaction as I did? Why would so many people be willing to go through so much time and effort over these fan creations? And weirdly enough, I didn't even find the answer to this question from researching this video. I actually found it through drawing. For no particular reason, as I was making this, I randomly felt like learning how to draw. And since I was spending so much time on it, I figured why not try to draw what Fujimoto draws? So to hold myself accountable without any context, I just started posting them onto Twitter. But what had me so confused was that others started to join in without asking. People were sending me DMs that were like, yeah, fuck it, I just felt like drawing too. And after spending a ridiculously long amount of time trying to figure out the science behind that, I realized I was going at it in the completely wrong way. It had nothing to do with some kind of objective reasoning or a certain way of thinking. The real answer to that third question is that things like inspiration, motivation, and passion can sometimes be contagious. I think when you look at the work of Fujimoto, millions, including myself, couldn't help but feel inspired, feel the urge to just want to make some cool shit. And I know for a fact that Tatsuki Fujimoto has had that exact same experience. I mean, this is a guy who can't go on a single interview without referencing some kind of a movie or TV show he's recently come across, and he wears that inspiration on his sleeve. I can count dozens of times when there's a clear homage to the work of others in his manga. Fujimoto is like this weird mess of his favorite things in life, and I think that's something we can all relate to. Hell, I've admitted this so many times it's not even funny, but this channel is the way it is because of these two people. I mean, I literally put a photo of Garfield like 20 times in this video because it was clearly and obviously inspired by this. But listen, man, if you made it this far into the video and still find yourself struggling to understand where I'm coming from, then that's okay. Maybe it doesn't make any sense for me to get this emotional over what's basically a bunch of drawings, and I just want you to know that if you feel this way, I totally understand. All I have to say to that is, I hope that one day you experience that special moment in your life in the same way that I did with this manga. It could be today, tomorrow, or a year from now. Whatever it is, and whenever it is, I'm sure you'll have plenty more along the way. Thanks. Hey, So the video's done, and maybe you're wondering 3 things. Are you tired? Yes. Will you be gone for another 4 months? Definitely not. Is this video sponsored? Yeah, somehow. There's no better feeling than being able to browse through the internet safely and having access to any movie or TV show of your liking. Well, with the help of the sponsor of this video, NordVPN, you can make that feeling become a reality. This is a true story, but around 7 months ago, I got hacked on pretty much every single account I'd ever made on my computer. And after crying for about 3 hours to my dad, one of the first things that we did was make an account with NordVPN. So I'm not even kidding when I say that this is the easiest software for me to promote, because it's literally something that I still use to this day. Do you want your experience on Netflix to not be atrocious? Do you want guaranteed protection from any potential malware or hackers that could be looking into any of your devices? Well, today, right now, at this moment, you can make that possible. NordVPN can be used for up to 6 devices on any major platform, whether it's Windows, Android, iOS, macOS, or Linux. It's a software that's available in more than 5,600 servers in 59 countries. So unless you live under a rock on Saturn, you can have access to all of these benefits and more right here, right now, today, and at this moment. And if you use the link nordvpn.com/Alex, you can get a huge discount on a 2-year plan with another 4 months added for free. And after you sign up, you can still use Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. It takes just 1 click. You open up the map, set it to a certain location, and boom, you are now the first person to have ever watched this video from the Atlantic Ocean. Once again, that's using nordvpn.com/Alex. Not Alex, Alex. Okay, so the video's like actually done now. I got nothing left. I'm just very tired, and I'm gonna spend the last second screaming.